much, Rubens. And good morning, everybody. It's again a pleasure to be here. I actually was trying to count how many times I've been here now since the last 2 years. I think this is the 7th time. And I think the highlight was actually last time when we also had the opportunity to go to the concert of Roger Waters in Sao Paulo. So I think I'm looking back at it as well as one of the highlights of my visits here. But I think this visit today, I think, is again, for me, very nice to be here, to see you all, to see good friends again, and also give you a bit of a corporate view from the Shell side of how we see the energy transition. I think it was already mentioned by Rubens, there is not really like a silver bullet or a quick solution for this. I think it's a long journey, and I'm very happy to say here that Cine is part of that journey that Shell and Cine are doing together here. So I'm the team lead in Shell for the New Energy Technologies and Research program. My colleague Ajay Mehta, who had hoped to be here, actually had to be in the Netherlands. So I hope next time he's the general manager of our team. I hope he will be here again. He was looking forward to that as well. So let me first go to the unfortunate slide that we always have to put up here. I think the reason here is it's not an eye test. The only reason that the slide is up here, we are talking here about Shell scenarios. And Shell scenarios means these are not facts, but scenarios indeed. So I think you should see this warning here as do not invest or divest shares in Shell on the basis of what I'm going to tell you in the next 30 minutes or so. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, say, the societal challenge that we see. I think Rubens was already mentioning or pointing to that as well. What we see is if you have more people want to go into higher prosperity levels, and by the time they go in higher prosperity levels, they also start using more energy. So I think if we look at the society as a whole, I mean, we will see from now to, say, 2070, an increase in population from 7 billion way over to 10 billion. I think that will result in an increasing energy demand. And of course, we all know that on the basis of the current energy system that we have, which is very much fossil-based, the result of the use of that energy and also the increase of that energy is that there will be an increase in CO2 concentrations in the air with all the detrimental effects of that. So I think the challenge that we face as a society is first and for all a challenge for more and cleaner energy. I think we need more on the basis of all the growth in population that we see. It needs to be cleaner, otherwise we will simply start raising the CO2 levels to unacceptable levels. And I think that also requires then, say, a reduction of the carbon intensity of every unit of energy that we use. So how are we going to do that? And as Ruben already explained, this is not a simple solution. I think this will require a lot of changes in the energy structure, the so-called energy transition, but also it will probably require a lot of time as well. And the question is, do we have enough time, and how can we do that? So I'm going to talk and show you like 2 or 3 slides on the Shell Sky scenario. Again, the scenario is a scenario, so it's not like fact-based. It's a scenario predicting how the future could develop. And of course, people may agree or disagree with these scenario developments. But I think for Shell, it's very important first to share its thinking how the energy transition could actually develop. And secondly, I think it's also a very important say, a pointer for the Shell organization as such and for our executives to see, okay, how could we actually steer the company in a direction that helps us to tackle and to live with these challenges that we see ahead of us. So I think the first element out of these Sky scenarios is the comparison between the energy structure and the buildup of energy sources that we have today versus what is predicted in the scenario to be somewhere in 2070. And I think the good thing about the pie chart in 2070, of course, is that the amount of renewable energy is increasing a lot. We see solar up to 32%, we see wind up to 13%, whereas currently in the current energy mix, it's only something like 1% or something like that. On the other hand, I mean, given the fact that we predict from the Sky scenario also a growth in population and a growth in energy demand, you also see that the size of the pie chart is such that only with renewable energy we are probably not able, say, to tackle the energy demand in the whole world in 2070. So we see it as inevitable that other sources of energy will still be in the mix. And I think it's important to realize here that certain areas are easier to decarbonize, so could use renewable energy fairly easily in certain cases, whereas in other cases, like shipping, like aeroplanes, it's sometimes very difficult to imagine actually how renewable energy could deal with the energy demand in these sectors. So there will be areas where decarbonization of the demand will be extremely challenging. So I think in Shell, if we again look at the sky scenario, there are several instruments that Shell sees as possibilities for both society but also for the company as such, how we can deal with the challenge ahead of us. So I think carbon pricing is clearly one of the elements that is out there. There's a lot of debate around this, but I think it's one of the things that need to be taken into the mix. Then energy efficiency, which has been dealt with in the past already a lot, but I think there is still a lot to be gained as well, particularly in the built environment. Electrification of final energy, and I'll come back to the point of electrification as such in the next slide. And then growing new energy systems. I mean, with all that renewable energy coming into the mix, I mean, it offers quite a lot of challenges itself as well, because the sun is not always shining, the wind is not always blowing, and sometimes there's a lot of sun and a lot of wind, so how do you deal actually with the intermittency of renewable energy? Whereas nowadays we are just relying on very high energy density fossil fuels that we use or we do not use, we store whenever we want. Then the option of carbon capture and storage. I mean, using fossil fuels, I mean, if there is an element in the mix to be seen in the next 50 years or so, then at least a capture of CO2 and sequestration of CO2 is an option as well. And I'll come back to that as well in one of my next slides in relationship to the Gas Innovation Center that we have here in Brazil as well from Shell. I think there is nature-based solutions, which is mentioned here as end deforestation. So I think there's a lot of elements in what can we do with nature in order to actually capture or sequester a lot of the CO2. And then, of course, I think we as consumers, we also need to change our behaviors. And how do we do that? I mean, Shell is not going to tell the consumer how to behave, but at least we need to be customer-centric and need to be engaged with that customer and see how that changing energy structure reflects both on our business and on the consumers itself. So I think I mentioned already electrification, and this is again a sky scenario. So this is not a fact. This is a prediction on the basis of scenarios that we do. But our prediction in these scenarios is that electrification will get deeply penetrated in all of the different elements in our society. So the picture on the left-hand side shows you electrification in industry, which nowadays is still very basically absent. I think in buildings and also in transportation. So e-mobility is one of the elements where we see electrification of transport coming in. And we all see in the sky scenario that in a period between now and, say, the end of the century, there will be big changes due to renewable electricity coming on stream and being very cheap, and electrification as a result playing out in all these different sectors. So I think this was a little bit about the why. So you could now say the what and the how. So what is Shell actually going to do? So I think the Shell strategy, if you think around scenarios and the energy transition, is that in principle, in a few words, our strategy is that we want to provide a world with more and cleaner energy solutions. I mean, that is at the highest level what we want to achieve. And of course, that is built up by the portfolio that we currently have. It's the capabilities that we have, and also the strategic ambitions that we have, and that we want to be a top quartile investment opportunity for the world. And underpinned by our values, goal zero and people. And I think I was very pleased to see from Rubens that at least say the attention, one, to HSSE starting this conference. Secondly, I think also the work-life balance that you mentioned, you caring about people, I think is very important in the Shell way of working as well. So I was really pleased to see that. Okay, so let me go. This is a pretty full picture, but I think so if you say, okay, the ambition is more and cleaner energy solutions, I mean, what is actually our ambition in reaching that? So I think our ambition is that we want to reduce our net carbon footprint. So Shell, at the level of our executives, have actually committed to a reduction in net carbon footprint of our energy products by 20% in 2035. And on the basis of the picture that you see on the right-hand side, I mean, the society trajectory, I mean, the Paris agreements tell you that actually we are still probably too high, but the ambition as well is to actually bring that further down and by 2050 be on par with society ambitions. So the picture that we have here is currently very much debated in Shell. I mean, everybody from high up in the organization to everybody on the working floor is actually living up to this ambition, and we are seeing how we can organize ourselves and the Shell organization to achieve these very stretched and challenging goals. So let me talk a little bit then about the organizational structure of Shell. This organizational structure, of course, is going to work the vision and the net carbon footprint ambition. So I think our organization is split between upstream businesses, so that's the conventional exploration and production of oil and gas. Then there is the so-called integrated gas and new energy business, which in the middle there, which is the, call it the emerging businesses in Shell. Then we have the downstream business, so this is all about converting hydrocarbon feedstock into products. And then next to that is the projects technology organization, projects and technology organization, to which actually I am part of myself. So I want to zoom in a little bit on this new energy business and integrated gas part of it, because that's actually where a lot of the activity is currently happening in order to see how Shell can be part of that energy transition and play in that space. So the new energy business has ambitions to both work in business opportunities around renewable power, call it the power business, as well as in new fuels. And I'll come back to what actually power and new fuels is in my next slide. But very important to mention here as well is that you have two options here, basically grow organically or actually acquire and grow more aggressively in this business. So the new energy business, renewable power and new fuels, is to a certain extent uncommon for Shell. It's a new area. We need to understand how you actually play as a big corporate. Also how to make money. I mean, we are not for nothing a corporate organization, so we want to make sure we also understand how you make money in such an environment. And in order to avoid, or maybe to say to promote that we can grow via mergers and acquisitions, we also have Shell Ventures, which is a corporate venturing organization that sits into the new energy, it sits in the new energy organization. I think it's important to realize as well here that although there is a lot of emphasis here on new energy, it's still very much clear that renewable energy, electrification as well will play out in our downstream business in chemicals. I mean, there are ways of electrification, for instance, of our chemicals operations and industry as well. So in that sense, new energies is one angle of new energies, but increasing amounts of renewable power, electricity coming on stream and being cheaper and cheaper also has effects probably on some of our other assets in Shell. Okay, just a picture of the new energy business. I think I mentioned already new fuels and power. I think what is important to realize is that this merger and acquisition growth is mentioned in the last two bullets on the left side, which is selective and opportunity-driven investment via Shell Ventures, and also capital investment in the order of about 1 to 2 billion per annum on average. So I think this is an ambition that Shell has publicly mentioned. And I think the areas where we are active, I mean in new fuels, it's biofuels, where we have been active already for a longer period of time. Hydrogen is another, hydrogen for mobility, and also hydrogen as an energy carrier. So we're working in partnerships and consortia, and we target a downstream return in the high teens of percentage. In terms of power, because the new fuels is still an area where you could say, okay, this is about molecules, this is what Shell understands. I think power, electrons is fairly new to us, although we are, as such, worldwide a very large power producer, but a very captive user in a sense. So we produce a lot of power that we use immediately ourselves. And in trading, we are very strong as well, particularly in the US. But being in the space of utilities and customer-centric, I think is a new game for Shell. So we are spending a lot of effort to grow into that area. So customer solutions, including electric mobility, is one of them. then optimization and trading and marketing, low carbon generation and storage of electricity, and there is a target equity return in the order of about 8 to 12% in that ambition. So now let me talk a little bit about, so how do we do this? I mean, we have both programs in Shell and organizations. So the first slide here is about the open innovation platforms that we have in Shell. And I need to mention here that these open innovation platforms, of course, are a continuum from very fundamental research up to a level where we do very serious investments in tens to tens of millions into startup companies and via Shell Ventures. So I think Shell Research Connect and Shell Game Changer, the general manager of Shell Research Connect and Shell Game Changer, Linne Viet, is actually in the audience here as well, and she will be attending the conference these 2 days. Is responsible for these two parts of the organizational platforms. And so, for instance, long-range research, where I'm going to talk about in the next part of my presentation, but also the Cine initiative, falls under this Research Connect organization. So Shell Ventures, I mentioned already, is then the venture vehicle that supports, for instance, the new energy business in mergers and acquisitions to grow more aggressively than just growing organically. And then we have an entity which is called Shell TechWorks. And Shell TechWorks is dealing with development and deployment of new technology, including what is available on the shelf that we can actually convert into deployment into our own organizations. So before I go there, I also like to introduce my other colleague who is Vice President, Integrated Gas and Carbon Capture Technologies, which is David Torres. So David Torres is also in the audience. He will be joining us as well in the next 2 days. So David is the champion and the relationship holder with the Research Center for Gas Innovation, which I would call our sister institute in Sao Paulo. So Cine is actually set up here in the Campinas area to a large extent. In Sao Paulo, we also have the Gas Research Center the Research Center for Gas Innovation. I think it's again an example of how we deal with open innovation. So let me now talk a little bit about, say, our long-range research technology platform and the vision that we have. I know this slide has been shown to you already, or at least some of you already a few times. The whole idea is that the organizational structures like Game Changer, like Research Connect, like Shell Ventures is the organization, but our programs in the new energy space, in the projects and technology organization are also spanning, say, a width from very fundamental research to something which I would call close to investable options for offshore wind or for hydrogen infrastructure. So what we are talking about here today for Shell is, in the Cine context, is our long-range research program. And I think our long-range research program, the vision there is that we want to make sure that we put a lot of emphasis on very specific scientific areas. And so we will see in the next presentations which ones these are, but I also talk a little bit about it in the next few slides. So I think this is all about building capability, but also looking for significant innovation. I mean, I think this is a very challenging area, what we are going to try in Cine, but also in our long-range research program in Shell. And I think it also has an impact across multiple applications, either being it storage or being it dense energy carriers or being it products out of methane. So how do we do this? We do this via strategic collaborations that we have globally. I think what you see on this picture here is first and for all our Brazil hub. So USP is mentioned there, but also Unicamp and IPEN, which are partly in our Cine organization and of course partly also in the gas research, the Gas Innovation Center that I just talked about. The bottom of the picture shows you our 3 major Shell R&D centers, one in Houston, one in Amsterdam, where I'm placed myself, and one in Bangalore. And around that we have a whole envelope of strategic collaboration. So with Berkeley on the West Coast, with Rice University in Texas, MIT. We have the UK hub. We collaborate with universities in the Netherlands. We have around our Bangalore research center collaborations with strategic partners in India and also with China. So I think we are spanning, in that sense, for our long-range research, the globe in terms of tapping into the major technology centers. And I think that's also the vision and the idea of this whole long-range research program, because the fundamental research that we are trying to do, and also the targets that we try to achieve, is something that Shell cannot do on its own. So we are trying to leverage the knowledge that is actually available worldwide with our internal in-house knowledge. And that also has been then, of course, the reason why we started to work here in Brazil, setting up this Cine Center as a next institution next to the Gas Innovation Center that we have in Sao Paulo. So this picture is familiar, I think, to most of you here. It shows you in the light yellow the areas where we collaborate, in the dense energy carrier space, in the advanced energy storage space, and in the methane to products space, and also in computational and data sciences. So these are the 4 areas where we have PIs working, and I think each of them will tell you today about the achievements and the progress that are being made in these different programs. I think it's important to mention that some people ask me, like, why do you have methane to products in your portfolio? I think it's important to realize that currently the only thing we do with methane is we burn it and we use the heating value of methane. Whereas in this case, we are looking for conversion of methane into more valuable products. And it could either be conversion by catalytic routes, but also by electrochemical routes. So that's also, again, where the electricity plays in a role. The dense energy carriers and the advanced energy storage are truly, I would say, new energy technology areas. And I'll like to give you a bit of the picture. If we talk about dense energy carriers agenda, and also the relationship between dense energy carriers and storage. I think this is a staircase that I've shown to some of you before as well. And I think from left to right you see the easiest or the highest energy utilization is basically photons coming from the sun, which we can use directly, either being it for heating or lighting. And lighting, of course, only by converting the photons into electrons. So once you are at electrons, I mean, the best use of electrons most of the time is always use them as electrons, because that's the highest efficiency you can get. But given the intermittency that I talked about, I mean, if you have too many electrons, you need to store some of the electrons. And up to a certain level, you can do that in advanced energy storage technologies, such as batteries. So that's why this is one of our areas in our long-range research program. The ultimate goal, however, is can we build energy carriers from these electrons? Because that's where we make the conversion from electrons, that you can store up to a certain amount of electrons, and then at a certain moment you need to convert to molecules. So the first step is actually converting to hydrogen by splitting water. So the elements around that is we need to have cheap electricity, so we need to have cheap photovoltaics, we need to have cheap electrolyzer technology at scale, which gives us the opportunity to produce actually hydrogen at a relatively low cost. So this is already quite a few challenges that I'm putting here on the table. I think then, of course, the next step then is, given that a hydrogen infrastructure is one option for an energy society, but on the other hand, I mean, hydrogen also has its difficulties or challenges. For instance, that you need, in terms of storage, is more difficult. It's a very lean gas. So the next option that you have is then converting that hydrogen into something else. And the something else is here CO2 that actually could serve as the backbone carrier for producing hydrocarbons. So very important of producing hydrocarbons out of CO2 and hydrogen is first that you have a CO2 conversion technology. So I think the biggest challenge in our dense energy carrier agenda is, can we have actually access to a CO2 conversion technology? I think there is off-the-shelf kind of solutions, reverse water gas shift, but of course there is also more innovative solutions that we are looking into in this particular Cine and Shell long-range research program. And then the ultimate goal, I would say, is if you recycle CO2 from point sources, it's of course carbon capture and utilization, so I think that's a good thing. But still, you are re-emitting that CO2 back into the atmosphere. So I think the ultimate holy grail, which has a very low probability of success and a very high risk development, but also if it's successful, I think there is an enormous value in it, is capturing CO2 from air, which will result in a net CO2 reduction from air. And then, of course, combining that CO2 with the hydrogen that you get out of photovoltaics and photons is then the holy grail of the dense energy carrier that we are looking for in this program. Thank you very much.